Hello, my name is Dominica Nolan. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, registered play therapist, national certified counselor, and certified clinical mental health counselor. I'm also the director of education and prevention services at Center for Child Counseling. Today, we're going to talk about adverse childhood experiences and trauma. So, let's talk about these messages or myths about resiliency, trauma, or raising children. How about this statement? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Does it actually make you stronger? What if you were emotionally, physically, or sexually abused by someone? How can that make you stronger? What about that one? Spare the rod and spoil the child. Or that babies don't remember. And that's a lie because they do remember. Imagine going through trauma and someone telling you that it wasn't that bad, or that you should get over it, or that your trauma happened for a reason, or it's all in your head. It doesn't feel good to hear things like that in the moments when we need someone the most. We now know that due to the way the brain develops, trauma in the earliest years can change the architecture of the developing brain and impact health throughout the lifespan. So what are ACEs? ACEs is an acronym that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, which are experiences or situations where a child under the age of 18 faces some sort of trauma or intense sustained stress that can affect their health and their life. The concept was first explored in a study conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, also called the CDC, and the insurance giant Kaiser Permanente in California between the years of 1995 and 1997. The original study asked approximately 17,000 people 10 questions about circumstances that they had experienced in their childhood. The study revealed some startling results and also indicated that many of the negative circumstances experienced in childhood had not only lifelong mental health implications, but also physical health effects. Since then, hundreds of independent ACEs studies have been conducted, and they have all reinforced the original findings, making the study of childhood adversity one of the most crucial components of modern healthcare. It is so crucial that ACEs are the single greatest unaddressed public health crisis of our time. So let's take a look at the different kinds of stress we can all experience in life. Understanding stress is one of the most important basic components to understanding ACEs, and that's why it's vital that we know how stress works. Stress at certain levels is positive. This positive kind of stress is short lived and involves a brief increase in heart rate, intensified focus, and a mild elevation in the levels of stress hormones that are released into the bloodstream. An example of this may be when you're studying for a test or are under a deadline and we really need to focus. We have put ourselves under a small amount of stress for a purpose, and it's not going to last far beyond completing the necessary task, like taking the test. In a more extreme example, the stress may be out of our control. If we're on a run and dog jumps out at us and starts barking, we may feel fear or panic for a few moments. It's a stressful situation. Hormones like adrenaline flood into our bloodstream and get us ready to respond to the perceived danger. Our body's preparing us for fight or flight reflex, getting us ready to run away from the danger quickly or stand our ground and confront the threat. As soon as the danger is removed, like we see that the dog isn't going to bite us or the owner comes and pulls the dog away, our heart rate returns to normal and we feel the stress diminish. This stress is positive too, since it's based on our primitive response to danger, which keeps us safe and alive. The second type of stress is moderate. We go through it for slightly longer periods of time in our lives. For example, we lose our job and it takes us time to find a new one, or we have a family member who is sick and needs extra help. This isn't a positive feeling, but it is tolerable stress. We get through it. This is especially true if we have other positive buffering influences or relationships in our lives, people who can understand what we're going through, show us compassion, and support us through these periods of difficult but tolerable stress. Toxic stress, however, is another story. Toxic stress is the result of the intense and prolonged activation of the body's stress response system. Often, this takes place in the absence of positive, buffering influences or relationships. Toxic stress is very damaging since it involves the repeated flooding of our systems with hormones like adrenaline and cortisol in order to allow us to face the stressful situation. This can cause chronic inflammation and a host of other health issues. Children who have to live with toxic stress are actually experiencing damage to their healthy brain development. Toxic stress delays development of certain parts of a young child's brain, and they may never catch up. So it's incredibly damaging to a small growing body and can have negative results throughout a person's lifespan. So, what is trauma? Well, trauma can be a single event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life threatening. Trauma may have lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well being. I love this quote by Dr. Gabor Mate, who says, "Trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you." In the next slide, we're going to watch Eric Kelly from Quantum Foundation talking about trauma.
When I think about trauma and the basic definition of trauma, a deeply disturbing or distressing experience in life, I think about growing up as a kid in the housing projects, and I've never met my biological father. And I realized later in life how emotionally disturbing that was for me. And I also realized how much help I really did need in getting over that emotional disturbance and that trauma.
Generally, ACEs are broken down into three specific situations that can cause trauma and result in the kind of dangerous toxic stress we've discussed. These three broad categories are abuse, which can be physical, emotional, or sexual; neglect, which can be both physical and or emotional; and household dysfunction, which includes domestic violence, substance addiction and mental illness, divorce, or the loss of a parent through a death or incarceration. While these are very broad categories and many more issues can be at play, these three areas form the basis for the questions on the original ACEs questionnaire. The most common ACEs arise from situations like divorce, poverty and or deprivation, substance abuse, severe physical or mental illness in the family, or loss of a parent to death or incarceration. Incarceration is significant because as of 2016, 2.3 million people were incarcerated in the United States. So that's nearly 700 people per 100,000. Of the entire 10 million prisoners in the whole world, the US houses almost 25% of them. So let's talk about ACEs and how it can impact health over lifetime. And everything starts at conception. Most of the times, it's intergenerational trauma that gets passed from generation to generation. Let's imagine a child, and I'm talking here about my own client who I worked with for many years, who experienced drugs in the utero, whose mom was physically abused when she was in the utero. And when she was born, there was domestic violence, there were drugs involved. This poor girl, in the first 6 weeks of her life, was never held, never washed. She was neglected. She was abused. She actually stopped crying because nobody would pick her up. So here we have a 6 weeks old child that already has so many ACEs. When you think about it then, her neurodevelopment is disrupted because her brain develops the most in the first 1,000 days of her life. In her case, she had severe speech delay. She got older, she went to school, And then we have the social, emotional, cognitive impairment. She had difficulties establishing and maintaining friendships. She had extreme difficulties controlling her emotions, self-regulating. She had extreme temper tantrums that would last hours each day. What happens when that child goes to high school? Well, they adopt health risk behaviors that I call short-term coping devices to feel okay. Drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, being promiscuous, just to feel that peace and love just for those few moments, to feel okay, because they never felt that when they were younger. And what does that lead to? Well, smoking cigarettes, we know that can lead to lung cancer. Being promiscuous, STIs, maybe being a teen mom. So that can lead to many diseases, disabilities, and social problems. And in the end, that actually can lead to early death by as much as 20 years. So what is resilience? Well, resilience is the ability to overcome serious hardship or to bounce back. Some of the protective factors include building a sense of self-efficacy and sense of control, because when someone is experiencing trauma, they feel like everything is out of control. Facilitating supportive adult-child relationships, being that buffer for the child, supporting them. Mobilizing sources of faith, hope, and cultural traditions, and providing opportunities to strengthen adaptive skills and self-regulatory capacities. So what can we do to help children develop resilience? Well, number one thing is we need to know what ACEs are, what is ACEs survey, and how to use it. Create a gratitude list and create hope in children. Play with them, because play is their language and toys are their words. Be the buffer. All the child needs is that one person in their life. It could be a teacher, a neighbor, maybe a grandmother, an uncle or an aunt, a mentor at school. Oprah talks about her fourth grade teacher who was her buffer. And remember that we all need buffers in our lives. Even as adults, we need that one person that we can call when we have emergency or we're experiencing trauma. Because remember that you need to put your oxygen mask on before you help the child. Try meditation. Mindfulness is so good for us. There's so many apps that we can use, and research shows that just 10 minutes a day of your meditation time can help our brain. So what can we do now? Well, number one thing, you gotta be aware. Stay informed. All of you that have watched this presentation are now aware about ACEs, and you know what ACEs is. So talk about it, do more research about it. There are so many books, videos, presentations, and trainings out there about this topic. And ask yourself, I wonder what happened when we see someone experiencing trauma or acting a certain way. Acknowledge their experiences and think or ask, how has this affected you in your life? And remember to stay without judgment. Telling someone important about a terrible event is very difficult, and it's important to help them come out feeling like a human being after telling their story. This video is a great example of someone being the buffer for a child. And that's because connection is so important at any age, especially so early in our lives, because we carry our early relationships with us for the rest of our lives.
Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Huh? Oh no, not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. 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 Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
Thank you so much for joining us today. For more information, please go to pbcbirth222.com.